Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about how to tell time in Spanish. If someone asks you the question, ¿Qué hora es? Then you look at your watch, and since we don't have, can't really show you, well, actually, I'm not wearing a watch. If I look over here at the bottom of my screen, if you can see my little cursor, it says 2:01. So if someone asks me, ¿Qué hora es? I'm going to say, Son las 2:01 de la tarde, which is essentially, I'll just go ahead and do it over here, 2:01, oops, 2:01 p.m. So when someone asks you ¿Qué hora es? When they ask you this little question right here, what they're asking you is what time is it? So you're going to look at your watch, you're going to look at your phone, you're going to look at the bottom of your computer screen, and you're going to tell somebody exactly what you see. Okay, so to explain that just a little bit further, when you tell time in English, you say it is 1 o'clock, it is 2 o'clock, etc. And the verb that we know up to this point that that means it is, or that is am or are, is sayer. And so you're going to use sayer every time when you're telling the time. So if it is 1 o'clock, because if you look at your clock up here, actually I'm going to go over here and make it be 1 o'clock. Oops. Okay, here we go. So if it's 1 o'clock, I have only gone to the first hour, so they consider that to be, it's singular. So when you say it's 1 o'clock, you're going to say es la una. If it's any other time, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, your hour hand has actually gone around the circle multiple times. So like we start out at 1, and then it goes around the circle twice to get to 2, 3 times to get to 3, or at least that's how I like to think of it. So anytime after 1 is going to be plural, and you're going to say son las instead. So if we go back over here, whoops. Okay, so if we go back over here, you're going to use, and I'll just go ahead and okay, so you're going to use es and son, es la with una and son las with dos. So if we look down here, if these are fictitious times, if it's 10 o'clock, it's not 1 o'clock. So you're going to say son las, and then you just say the number. And so you would refer back to, I think it's page 12 maybe, somewhere around there, 10, 11, 12 in your text. And that tells you what the numbers are. So 10 is 10. So I'm just going to say son las 10, and I've got PM, so 10, it's in the evening, so I'm going to say son las 10 de la noche. If I go down here and it's 1 o'clock, since it's 1, I'm going to say es la instead of son las. Es la una, oopsies, es la una de la tarde. And I'm going to make it la, I'm using una here because what we're talking about in that block is the hour, and the hour is feminine because it's hora. If it's the minutes, you would say uno, but if it's the hour, you're going to say una. So es la una, and this time I'm going to say de la tarde. So you say, if it's in the evening, you say de la noche. And if it's in the afternoon, you're going to say de la tarde for AM and PM. And here I've got 3 o'clock AM, so it's not 1, so I'm going to say son las, and 3 is tres. De la, this time I'm going to say mañana, because this time it's in the morning. So if it's AM, you're going to say de la mañana. If it's PM, you're either going to say de la tarde or de la noche. Okay. However, it would be great if time was always on the hour, but usually it's not. Like if you look over here, I've already got that it's 2:05 in the afternoon. So most of the time when we're telling time, we're going to need to tell the minutes as well. And it's really easy to do. So we had already done, it's 10 in the evening. So you do that again. You say son las 10, but it's not just 10. It's 10 and some minutes. It's not just 10, the hour, 10 o'clock. It's 10 and some minutes. So I'm going to say son las 10 y, which is and then I'm going to list however many minutes it is, which in this case is cinco, and then I'm going to say de la noche. Okay. Down here it's 1, but it's not just 1 anymore. It's 1 and 15 minutes. So I'm going to go back. If the hour that I'm mentioning, the hour that I'm saying or writing is 1 o'clock, I'm going to say es la una y, and however many minutes that is, that's 15. I'm going to say 15 de la tarde. Okay. Now, you can do a little bit more with, there's a couple of ways. You could either say es la una y 15, or and go over here. Let me get rid of this. Oops. No, I might just, let's see if I can get rid of it. I don't know if I can get rid of it. I was going to get rid of it and do a new clock, but let's see here. Let me do a new clock anyway. All right, there we go. All fixed. So what I had is 115, so I'm going to draw in 115, which would be something kind of like this. Okay. And what I've done when I do that, if you look at your circle, your clock is kind of like a pie. If I cut it like this and like this, let's see. How much of my circle have I covered, or how much of the circle has my minute hand covered when it gets to 15 minutes? Well, if you look at it like that, and you can ignore that my lines aren't perfectly straight, it's covered a fourth of the circle. And a fourth, I don't know if I can write, a fourth is, oops, I don't want to do that color. Okay. So a fourth is really hard to write with the mouse. Es cuarto. Looks like my kindergartner's writing. Okay. So what I can do when it's a fourth is I could say es la 1:15 de la tarde, or I could also say es la 1:15, or 1 and a fourth of the clock. I've gone a fourth of the minutes within the hour. So es la 1:15 de la tarde. Okay. Down here, it's 3. So I'm going to do the same thing I did up there. It's not 1. So instead of saying es la, I'm going to say son las 3 y, and how many minutes is it? 30 de la mañana. However, again, there's an additional option here. So let's see if we can't redo our. Let's see if I can. Okay, and let me get rid of this right here. Bye bye. Okay, so what I had 3:30. So let's draw that in. 3:30. And if I take and I divide my circle up again into fourths, hey, I did a little better that time. Let's do a different color. Let's do blue. Then this time my minute hand has actually covered half of that circle, and a half, I can go down here, a half is media. Is media. So I can go down here and say son las 3:30 de la mañana, or I can say son las 3:30 de la mañana. And it's actually preferred, it's not wrong to do it the other way, but it's preferred to use the cuarto and the media. So I'm going to highlight those. Okay. Then down here, it's 12:55 p.m. Now you could go ahead and say it's 12 and 55 minutes, but it's more common to go ahead and say it's the next hour. So if it's 12:55, it's almost 1. And even though it isn't 1, because what's going to come out of my mouth or what I'm going to write on the paper is 1, I'm going to treat it like I would as if it were 1 and say es la una. But it's not really 1. It's a little bit before 1. So I can't do what I did before where I was putting and with the e's because it's not 1 and something. It's 1 actually minus something. So I'm going to say es la una menos, and how many minutes is it going to take me to get to 1? Well, if I go back over here and let's get rid of this. You can tell I'm having fun drawing. I don't usually play with this thing. But anyway, so if it is 12:55, I'm going to draw that in. Oops. Very pretty there. And I don't know if this will work or not. We'll try. Oops. Not that. Okay. So it's 5 minutes. It's that if it's 12:55, there's only 5 minutes to get there to the next hour. So what I'm going to say is la una menos cinco. So 1 minus 5 is what you're seeing there. 12:55 is 1 minus 5 de la tarde. And down here, if it's 8:45, I'm going to go ahead and say, because 8:45 is almost 9, I'm going to say son las 9 menos. And then when you do that, you can do the same thing again if it's 8:45. Whoops. It's 8:45. That's going to be pretty much at the 9. Oh, we'll both kind of be here. Okay. And so what's left is if I draw this, if I divide this up into fourths again, then what's left, if it's 8:45, there is a fourth of this, the minute hand has to go a fourth of the circle to get to the next hour. So you'd either say son las 9 menos 15 minus 15, because that's how many minutes it takes to get there, de la mañana, or you could say son las 9 menos cuarto, a fourth, because you could either, you know, if it was 9:15, it would be son las 9 y cuarto, but if it's 8:45, it's son las 9 menos cuarto. It's going to take you a fourth to get there. Oopsies. Too many little thingies. Okay. Okay, so I guess we'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and write a couple of these out. This is 12:15, so what that would be is son las 12:15 de la tarde. This is 12:45, so I'm going to say es la una menos cuarto de la tarde. Here it's 8:40, it's almost 9 o'clock, so I'm going to say son las 9 menos, and it's going to take me 20 minutes to get there, so I'm going to say son las 9 menos 20 de la noche. Here it's 1:30, so I'm going to say es la 1:30 de la mañana. Here it's 7:10, so I'm going to say son las 7:10 de la mañana. Here it's 5:55, so it's almost 6 o'clock. I could say son las 5:55, but it's more common to say it's 6. Son las 6 menos. It's going to take me 5 minutes to get to 6 o'clock, so I'm going to say son las 6 menos 5 de la tarde. Here it's 4 in the morning. Oopsies. So I'm going to say Son las 4 de la mañana. And be careful of that because cuarto and cuatro, if you see cuarto up here, they're very similar, just the R and the T are flop. So you want, are flip flop. So you just want to make sure that you don't accidentally spell cuatro when you mean cuarto or vice versa. So son las 4 de la mañana. And here it's 1:20, so es la 1:20 de la tarde. Okay. Let's see. One other thing before I go on, in punto means on the dot. So if it's right on the hour, like here it's 4 o'clock, you could say son las 4 de la mañana, or you could say son las 4 en punto de la mañana. I don't know how often you want to use on the dot. I find that it come, the times that I would use it is probably with my children, saying, like, if I had a babysitter, maybe mis hijos tienen que estar en la cama a las 9 en punto, like they have to be in bed at 9 on the dot. Or maybe, if I was coaching my son's t-ball team, I might say nuestro partido empieza a las 6 en punto, en el tienen que estar aquí a las 6 en punto. Or maybe, our class starts at 11 in the morning, and I'd say, clase empieza a las 11 en punto. So that I'm trying to say, like, you've got to be, so whenever you want to tell somebody you need to be home at this time on the dot, or this thing starts on the dot, that's when you would use en punto, just to kind of emphasize. I don't know, parents might use it for curfew, saying, you have to be at home at 11 on the dot, not 11:05, not 11:10, but 11 on the dot. Tienen que estar en casa a las 11 en punto. Okay. Another thing, that when it's 12 o'clock, there's a couple of expressions, just like what we have in English. If it's 12 in the afternoon, you can say mediodía. You could, here for 12 noon, I could either say son las 12 de la tarde, son las 12 en punto de la tarde, or es mediodía, it's midday. And if it's 12 a.m., I could either say son las 12 de la mañana, son las 12 en punto de la mañana, or es medianoche, midnight. So you could use mediodía or medianoche for 12 noon and 12 in the morning. Now, if someone asks you, what happens when someone asks you this question? ¿A qué hora, we're looking right here, ¿a qué hora empieza la clase de español? A las 8 de la mañana. Okay, so we have hora in here, and que, again, not exactly the same phrasing. And if you look back over here at our screen, you see that it says 2:19. Well, that's not 8 o'clock, which is what I'm listing here, is not what time it is. So this question is probably not asking me what time it is. It's actually saying, at what time does Spanish class start? At 8 in the morning. So if someone asks you at what time something starts or ends, etc., you can't use es la and son las, because those are saying what time it is. You have to say at, and that's where the a comes into play. And so for when someone asks you a qué hora, it's the same rules apply. You want to be singular with one. If it's 1 in the afternoon that something is starting, you say a la una. For any other time, you say a las dos, a las tres, etc. So if this says a qué hora llegas a casa, what time do you arrive home? If it's 12:50, you're going to say a la una menos 10 de la tarde. If it's 3:30, you're going to say a las 3:30 or 30 de la tarde. And if it's 9:40, you'd say a las 10 menos 20 de la mañana. So, for example, down here, it says, when do these people arrive at home? So if it's 1:45, it's almost 2 o'clock. So I'm going to say a, and because I'm going to say 2, even though it really is 1, if what's coming out of my mouth or what I'm writing on paper is going to be 2 o'clock, I can't use la, I'm going to use las. And then I'm going to say dos menos cuarto, because it's actually taking me 15 minutes to get to the next hour. So a las 2 menos cuarto de la tarde. And that's saying at 2 or at 1:45 in the afternoon. And so here, Raul, he gets there at 6:30. Again, that's not 1 o'clock that's going to come out of my mouth or I'm going to write on my paper. So I'm going to say a las, that's 6:30, because that's when it's when your minute hand gets halfway around the clock, that's when you can say media. So a las 6:30 de la noche. Here, Teresa, it's 11:40 p.m. So again, what's coming out of my mouth and what I'm going to write is going to be 12, which isn't 1. So I'm going to say, oops, a las 12 menos, because I'm not quite at 12, I'm menos 20 de la noche. 2:25, Pablo gets back at 2:25 a.m. Again, what's going to come out of my mouth and what I'm going to write is not going to be 1, so I'm going to say a las 2:25 de la mañana. 10:20, again, what's going to come out of my mouth, what I'm going to write is not 1 o'clock, so I'm going to say a las 10:20, because it's 10 and some minutes de la mañana. Fernando comes at 3:50 p.m. Again, I'm not saying or writing 1, so I'm going to say a las, and it's almost 4, so I'm going to say 4. But since it isn't quite 4, I'm going to minus those minutes, which are 10. So a las 4:10 de la tarde. Here, Marta comes at 12:15. Again, I'm not going to write or say 1, so a las. And this isn't close to the next hour, so I'm going to go ahead and say 12:15 de la mañana. And then Jaime is at 7:10. Again, what's coming out of my mouth and what I'm writing is not 1, so I'm going to say a las 7:10 de la noche. Okay. There's one last little piece of information and then I'll stop. When you all of these terms, I've been using day, de la mañana, de la tarde, de la noche, and I've been using day because I've been mentioning specific times. But if you want to say, like if I ask you when you study, you might not study the exact same time every day. Maybe you always study in the afternoon, but maybe on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you get home at I don't know, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so you start studying at 3. And on Tuesday, Thursday, maybe you get home at 12 in the afternoon, so you start studying at 1. So if you wanted to just say, I study in the afternoons, you replace your day with por. So if you don't have a specific time, then you use por with those expressions instead of day. You only use day if you're going to mention a specific time, like 10:30. So if I want to say I study in the afternoon, I say estudio por la tarde. But if I want to say my Spanish class starts at 10:30, then I have to use de la mañana. Okay, and that's pretty much it. So hopefully that all made sense.